Industrial Thrive and Immigrants Arrive. I am, as always, your host, Christopher Paul Dugdale, MEDMA. We are Duncanville High School in these United States, and today is October 28th, 2020. And on this date in history in 1886, the Statue of Liberty was dedicated. They finally put it all together. It took them longer because they sent over the directions in French. You know, what the crap, Frenchies, you know? You should go back to your country. Well, I guess they never left, so that's a moot point. Sorry, America. Well, anyway, that was dedicated to this day in history. So everyone have a great day, and we're going to learn today. Hopefully. Well, we're having fun again. So during the early stages of the United States, you have the National Road or Cumberland Road that was built. Okay, it goes all the way from Maryland, eventually all the way to St. Louis. During this time period, it's going to stretch to Vandalia, which I don't know anything about that city. It apparently didn't put it on the map the way that they wanted to. Terre Haute is still a pretty popular city in Indiana. If you lived in southern Indiana, you've got, you know, as far as great Indiana cities, I mean, I guess you have Evansville. It's the biggest one in the south. Next to where my family grew up, you have Terre Haute, which there's some shopping there, and Indianapolis, the capital. And if you wanted to go for a 3B or 3A, I'd probably say French Lick, where Larry Bird is from. So that tells you how, you know, eventful Indiana is. They still point towards Larry Bird, who graduated from college in '79 from Indiana State. So yeah, so as old as I am is how far they have to go back to find something else to latch onto. Guess they're not really jumping on Mike Pence. The Claremont was invented by Robert Fulton. It was a steamboat that could go in any direction except for up. You know, because if it sank, it wouldn't, you know. Anyway, so it could go in any direction. So this revolutionizes ocean travel because now you could get across. You wouldn't have to rely on the wind in any way whatsoever. You know, I know that they had the caravel that could sail against the wind, but if you have zero wind, then there's another issue that you're going to have. So, I mentioned earlier that British troops were, well, this would be last time. I mentioned earlier that British troops were freed up in their war against France. The reason that was is Napoleon was defeated. Now, Napoleon was a terror on the mainland of Europe. The first person really to try and conquer the continent since probably Julius Caesar about, I don't know, 1800 years earlier. I mean, I wouldn't call the Holy Roman Empire anything to be afraid of. You know, the Empire of Charlemagne was not much bigger than France. So there's nothing really that compares to what Napoleon was doing up until this point. Anyway, so they get together and they have this negotiation at the Congress of Vienna, and they create what's called the Concert of Europe. And this is something that actually keeps the peace for 99 years. I mean, you have a conflict in the Franco-Prussian War with the unification of Germany, the Crimean War, which is a very small conflict in comparison to everything else, but you have 99 years of relative peace on the European continent. So, by the way, that will violently end with a war no one had ever seen before, you know, starting in 1914, but you have peace up until that time, okay? And it kind of becomes something that shows the U.S. maybe we should start negotiating a few treaties of our own. But we shouldn't be in a rush, you know. You want to be careful. Don't be in a rush. The RushPago Treaty. Oh, wow, it's like I knew this was coming. The RushPago Treaty was between the U.S. and Great Britain, and it limits naval forces on the Great Lakes. To be honest, right now, it looks like we've super, you know, changed that because, you know, we rest most of our old battleships on Lake Michigan just in case, but it's not really an act of aggression when we do that. But anyway, I guess they signed some type of change to that. The Convention of 1818, this reduces forts along the border between the U.S. and Great Britain. And right now, between the U.S. and Canada, you have the largest unfortified border in the world. And at that time, it was the largest unfortified border in the world also. And the U.S. and Britain agreed to jointly occupy Oregon and also ignore the claims of every other country. So we ignored any claims that Spain had to it and any claims that Russia had to it. So that was really cool that we found a way of bringing ourselves together and saying screw you to some other nations. We also got fishing rights off the coast of Newfoundland, which is one of the greatest places in the world to go fishing. That's where they get some of those tuna that are worth like $700 or $800 each. So it's kind of like swamp people, except they actually make a livable wage. Voting requirements changed a lot in the United States between 1800 when Jefferson became president and 1830 when, who was president in 1830? That would be Jackson took over. And what you're seeing is a move away from property requirements or even taxes to universal white male suffrage. And I know this doesn't seem like much of a move, but it's a major move forward to start to allow all of any group to vote, because that allows every moron within that group to also vote. Okay? And by the way, I hope no one in this class feels like their vote is a waste, because I have to say that, you know, it's such an important part of the United States, making your voice heard, you know, casting that vote, you know, helping to put that person in office. I know that Texas has been a largely Republican state, but a lot of that is because of the fact that not all the Democrats, but a large number of Democrats have just been defeated by the fact that it's been Republican for so long. And the way that changes is for people to go out and vote more, and then it becomes more of a battleground state, and you really get a chance at selecting a candidate instead of falling under the guise of whoever the majority of the people, you know. The fact that it's been a Republican state for the last 50 years is, you know, a little bit appalling, because you don't want to have such a fixation on one party, and we've had a big problem with that in the United States. So the American system. So Henry Clay, by the way, one of the ugliest people we'll talk about all year. I mean, you know, if you didn't tell me, and what I'm going to say is probably one of the worst things ever said, but kind of looks like Michael Jackson after he was burned. You know, he has no nose. You have the tight crease lines on the mouth. You know, and I'm not making fun of Michael Jackson. That must have been horrific. That Coke commercial gone wrong. But this is actually what he looked like without any type of accent like that. By the way, Henry Clay wanted to be president of the United States. With a face like that, he probably never would have had a chance today. And a very odd note, and by the way, I'm not here to judge who's attractive and who's not. It was deemed, at least before the last election, that every election, the more attractive of the two candidates won. I don't know. I mean, if that's really a battle you want to fight, you can go back and check them out and go, ooh, he's definitely more attractive than him. You know, and if so, that's fine. But remember, all this American system was a attempt at getting Clay into the White House. So he wanted a strong banking system with easy credit available to everyone. He wanted to have a protective tariff to establish and protect U.S. manufacturing. He wanted higher prices for federal land. So when you sold federal land, you could improve things in the United States, build roads and build canals to connect each other together for trade. But I'm going to tell you a little secret here. Anytime the U.S. is building a major road or a railroad across the nation, it's for one reason. It's not for trade. It's for defense. Okay? If you have to move if you have to move troops from one side of the nation to the other, and it takes, 6 months to a year to move them by land, then you build the railroad. The same thing whenever you're building the highway system. And whenever planes become viable, now all the major highways are wide enough to land our major airplanes on. So if you have to, you can turn any stretch of the highway into a runway. Anyway. So just some fun facts for everyone. Just some fun facts. Eli Whitney. He invented the cotton gin. Okay, so I hope just about everyone knows who Eli Whitney is because of the cotton gin. But let's talk about some other facts about Eli Whitney. He didn't actually invent the cotton gin, one of his slaves did, but he took credit for it because he owned the slave and he had the ability to file patents where his slave didn't. At the time he invented the cotton gin, slavery in the South was becoming to the point where it was just not making as much money, and it was hard for them to keep afloat in the South because the process of removing the seeds from the cotton is such a grueling, it takes so much time to do. I've done it once by hand, and, my cotton ended up like brown from all the blood that, I cut myself in like 5 places pulling the sharp seeds out. So whenever they come up with this invention of the cotton gin, where you could remove seeds just about as fast as you could crank that machine, it reinvigorated slavery. So if you want to know why slavery continued to exist after 1793, that cat right there, Eli Whitney, was really the cause of it. Okay. The second thing he does, and this is really important for the North and really manufacturing as a whole, and this is as important to manufacturing as the assembly line is to manufacturing, from Henry Ford, and that is the introduction of interchangeable parts. Because during this time in history, if you had anything break, you had to take it to someone, and they had to fashion a new part for you. Okay, imagine right now with all the people who've dropped their phones that if they had to go and find a specialist to go and make them a new screen, measure it because every phone was different, the amount of time it would take to do that, and the cost of making a new screen for your phones. Okay, instead right now you can call Amazon, and depending on how old your phone is, for $14 or for much more than that, you can get yourself a new screen and replace it yourself or take it to someone else to do. But it was revolutionary to make all of your parts in the same way, so that all of them were identical, so you could take anything and change them out without any type of stress. Well, anyway, so that was interchangeable parts. So he reinvigorates slavery in the North, and he makes manufacturing better in the slavery in the South and manufacturing in the North. So really, if you want to look for someone you can point at to helping bring along the Civil War, it's this cat right here, Eli Whitney, that everyone knows, but not as infamously as they should. Now moving into the Industrial Revolution, which is something that I alluded to in the past slide. This is really a game-changing event in the world because it's going to create all types of changes, including mass urbanization, flocking to cities for jobs, and, anyway. So it starts in Great Britain, and it's a way of mass-producing things using machinery. And companies were able to pay better. A lot of farmers were really living on a subsistence living. There was not really a lot of market for a lot of their crops because the majority of people were farmers. There wasn't much need outside of their farms for products. So anytime they needed to trade something, they were trading it at a disadvantage because there were so many farms. It was hard to have, to make good on all the products that you have. Eventually, the Industrial Revolution will make agriculture more successful, which will cause more problems because since farms are more productive and they're able to produce more food, then that's going to lower the price of food as well and put many farmers into a danger of bankruptcy. So one additional thing that comes out of the Industrial Revolution, the market revolution. And this is the economy shifting from small farms and workshops to industrial centers. People didn't grow their own food or make their own clothing, and the home was separate from business. This is something my mom grew up with. Grew up on a farm. They grew all their own food, and my grandma made all of their clothing. Okay, and she did that from cloth from the flour sacks. Now, don't get a flour sack confused with a potato sack. because that would just be awful and itchy. But the flour sacks had more of the fabric that we're used to today. It wasn't quite as soft, but it was much softer than a potato sack. So uh, when you went to buy flour in town, or sometimes when you went to go buy feed, companies would put them in this cloth material so that you would buy them to make clothes from. Then it would become an advertisement for their company, and it would be more likely to get you to buy their product and advertise so that other people go, wow, that's a nice piece of fabric. Where'd you get that from? It's like, oh, well, I got it from String Bean's feed, from the string bean farm down the street. And they're like, oh, well, I'm going to go buy String Bean's feed also so that I can have similar cloth. And they're like, oh man, then we'll look just alike. But they didn't care about that. That's a new thing where people are like, oh my God, they're wearing the same shirt as I am. Yeah. Well, anyway, so this is a market revolution. Believe it or not, I took a course on this for a full 16 weeks in college, and I've kind of broken it down to the most important thing, where it's just people moving off of farms into the city. But the change of going from being a rural farmer to living in the city that didn't have the housing that everyone needed to move into the city meant that people lived in really tight conditions. There was horrible squalor, and just whenever you have so many people moving to the city, one of the things you don't think about is the fact that you have to get all their boo-boo and tinkle out of the city. So if you don't have a sewer system in place, it's not long before you have rivers of tinkle boo-boo just running down the street, and that will cause more people to get dysentery and a lot of other problems in the city, where you just have an influx of rats and other things to just spread disease. So I don't know how you can prepare for this, but that's one of the issues that you have. Now, Samuel Slater, pictured left, he's the father of the American factory system, and he stole plans for a British textile machine and started the first textile factory. So really, the father of our American factory system is a thief, and we stole everything from Great Britain. Now, I know all of you are mesmerized by that picture right there. That is a picture of the very first factory. And I know you're like, wow, who's that sexy man there? Well, if you were taking my sister all of her stuff in Maine, and I had driven for 32 hours straight, and I needed to get out of the car and stretch, and so we got off the highway and pulled into the first parking lot when we were in Rhode Island, and we pulled right into this parking lot, and we got there, and I was like, hey, that looks like the building I talked about yesterday in class. Because, whenever I taught this back then, I was teaching this in early November instead of late October, because, our anyway, it doesn't really matter. So I was like, oh my God, look at this. And so I went and took a picture there, and I put it in the PowerPoint notes. So if you're wondering why I'm so much sexier in that picture, it's probably because it was about 12 years old, and you have a 32-year-old Doug Dell or a 31-year-old Doug Dell instead of a 44-year-old Doug Dell. The power of technology. Actually, I guess I was 32 at the time. I'm sorry I lied to all of you. Didn't mean to mislead you. Anyway, that's the first factory. And one of the things you probably should have noticed on the last picture is a lot of the factories were built on rivers because they would use the stream of the river to turn the machines. And, anyway, so I'm going to go back. Well, no, actually, I can't really go back just a minute because that would do all types of weird things. But anyway, so down at the bottom you have the Lao girls, and these are women that worked in factories and lived in dorms. Women that did not want to get married. So basically, they worked 6 days a week and had to go to church on Sunday, and they had escorts that would follow them around and make sure that no guys talked to them. And at this time period, you have about 10% of the women in the country working outside the home. So now I'm going to attempt to go to the next slide, and there is my mouse. Okay, so this is called the Land of Opportunity, and it's mainly because it was different from anywhere else in the world at the time. And you have to think to yourself, what would it take for you to leave where you are now and to go to another country? Okay, people talk about it all the time, but realize that at this point, you don't really have job skills for anything more than entry-level jobs. You move to another country with another language, they don't even need you in the entry level jobs because, you know, that's being held by people that speak the language in their country. And this is no shot at immigrants in this country. It's just kind of the truth of the matter is if you want an entry level job, you have to be able to communicate with your employer. Okay? And so why on earth would anyone go? It's because we were paying such a better wage than everyone else in the world. Okay? Why is it that so many Mexicans come to the United States? It's because the average wage in Mexico is much closer to $2 an hour. And you can come over here and work a minimum wage job and get paid $7.25. You can work two of those, and instead of making, $7.25 times 40 is what, $150. Instead of making $150 a week, by the way, is anyone not going to question my math? Because that's far off, and all of you just accepted what I said, and it hurts my feelings just a little bit that no one wants to take the time to question the math I just threw out. Okay, if you're making $7.25 a week and you're working 40 hours, that is $290 a week. So then you could make about $600 a week if you're working two jobs. And I've known a lot of people who were legal immigrants who were working 2 weeks a job and living in an apartment with sometimes 8 guys, and they'd all sleep on cots or small beds inside, but send the majority of the money home to their families all the time. And so their families were able to live a much better life in Mexico as a result. So America at the time offered immigrants employment. All those factory jobs were available to anyone who wanted to take them. And remember, companies want to pay the least they can, so a lot of times they hired immigrants. So were they actually taking our jobs then? Well, they were working for less, but I can't say that there were, I don't know. To me, it's always been a stupid argument. We have no required military service. There is no draft in the United States. Now, that will change during the Civil War, but during this time period, there's no military draft. Religious freedom, you could practice any religion that you wanted, and social mobility. There was no type of caste system you were born into that prevented you from living a better, wealthier life. Okay, to get here, you would buy a ticket as steerage, and that's where they keep the cows on boats. Hence the word steer. And this was the cheapest way to get here to Ellis Island. And immigrants poured into the U.S. by the thousands for factory jobs and for better wages. Now, as you know, and this is not a new thing, Americans don't like immigrants. And by the way, I'm not saying every American, every immigrant, but it is more often than not. So, well, I guess I'll get into that here in just a minute. So, you have two major groups that are coming in at the time. Okay, about 5 million Germans and about 4 million Irish people. Okay, Germany is just packed with people. Okay, Europe is overpopulated, and there's all these revolutions in 1848, crop failures, and so a lot of Germans will come and buy Western lands, become farmers, and really keep to themselves. Among these people are members of my family who it took them 3 generations to learn English. So if you're looking for anyone who's going to say you should learn our language first, if you had the ability to go to school out of your hard schedule and learn another language before you move there, then you are probably not going to leave the country you left because you're living really well. Okay? They were much wealthier than the Irish. They bring over the whole idea of kindergarten, which is a way of socializing children before they got to first grade. Kindergarten actually translates to children in the garden. So that was an attempt to try and get kids ready for school before they got to school, which is kind of what we use pre-K for now. So a pre-K to K and then first grade. Anyway, a large number of Germans will also flock to South America, to Brazil and Argentina. So I guess as a spoiler for the future, after World War II, a large number of Nazis will flee to the United States, Brazil, and Argentina because they can more easily hide in the populations there. Irish immigration, okay? You've got a major problem with the potato famine. 2 million people died of starvation. they started flocking to the cities of Ireland, which couldn't take care of them, and eventually they're going to go out and migrate to other countries. A large number of them do come to the United States, but many of them also go to Mexico because Mexico was a Catholic nation and it was a place where there was land and I guess some opportunity. But Americans hated the Irish, okay? And Americans hate immigrants anyway. That's not really a new thing. That's been around since John Adams' presidency, and I believe, that there's even some type of wall that Trump wants to build to try and split between us and Mexico. So it's not like anything changes, just the group we hate the most, revolves throughout time. So Irish were so hated, they were the least valuable creatures that were humanoid in the United States. You'd see signs in windows all the time that said, Nina, no Irish need apply. And if you had a very dangerous job that could cost the life of whoever was doing that, they chose Irish people first, because slaves had value as, had monetary value, and other groups were more valuable than a dirty Irishman. And by the way, I'm 1/8 Irish and 3/8 German, so I guess I'm a little bit offended by the slide, so I might fight myself later, because the 3/8 of me that's English, really has a problem with the 1/8 of me that's Irish. While I'm sleeping, it's always a battle for my soul. Yeah, and so far, nobody's winning, because I keep changing the dates of the battle. Nativism is a hostility or hatred towards foreigners and Catholics. Now, I know what you're thinking. I understand why, because I really hate foreigners, but why do they hate Catholics? By the way, I'm hoping no one feels that way. But the question is, why do they hate Catholics? And a big reason for that is because of the structure of the Catholic Church. And for a long time, the Pope would control political events that happened throughout Europe and influence kings and the people to rebel or, kind of force policy. So the thought here was if enough Catholics moved over, they would turn us into a Catholic nation and make us beholden to the Pope. So out of this hatred was born a political party. Okay? Now you hear it called the American Party. Wow, that sounds patriotic. No, but it's basically a white supremacy party. Okay? So the Know Nothing or American Party, this is anti-Catholic, and it's anti-foreigner and nativist. And they tried to push for laws to ban foreigners from public office. And the way you told people that you were part of that party is you'd go, I know nothing. And that actually meant that you had an idea of what the party was. I don't know. I still think it sounds kind of dumb. But who am I? I wasn't alive during that time. George Catlin begins, he's really the first environmentalist in the nation. And he's trying to have the federal government protect nature. And one of the first things he protects is Yellowstone Park in Wyoming. A breathtaking area. It's one of the few places where the buffalo were able to survive. And by the way, the buffalo went to about 100 or less to now there are about 3 million buffalo roaming the United States. 3 million delicious buffalo just waiting to end up on my plate. Okay? And I know that probably went differently than you expected, but, what are you going to do? During this time, I thought I'd put in the evil stuff with the beautiful scenery. You have the Boston Associates, which is the first corporation in the United States. And then Commonwealth versus Hunt. This made unions legal, and this was a triumph for all the laborers. But many businesses would call in scabs or strikebreakers anytime unions went on strike. Anyway, I'm moving on. This leads us to the second bank of the U.S., and this is led by John C. Calhoun under James Madison. And it was modeled after Alexander Hamilton's bank. In fact, it was really identical. And they were given a 20-year charter. Now, one thing you may or may not know, whenever things are passed by Congress, unless it's an amendment, they have to renew these things every 20 years. So, like the Civil Rights Acts of the 1960s have to be renewed or they are no longer enforced. Okay? I don't see that happening, but then again, I didn't see 2020 coming. not like this. Okay, so anyway, uh, so that's the second bank in the U.S. It appears that we might have had an opposing viewpoint on this, and we also had a court case over this with John Marshall. The McCulloch versus Maryland had to do with this. The tariff of 1816 was a protective tariff that helped U.S. manufacturers by taxing foreign goods. See, in truth, the United States wants you to buy American products. It's better for the economy whenever you do so. Whenever you buy, like from my belt company, okay? When you buy from my belt company instead of buying products on Amazon from China, then then what happens is, that money goes into my pocket and all my workers at my belt company. Then they go and they spend that in their local economy, and that helps the local restaurants, the local, you know, the the local clothing stores, and all the local businesses in town, or the local car salesman. And so then that money, it kind of goes into the community and helps things grow. And when you buy a foreign good, all that happens for the community where those came from. So that helps the economy, in a lot of cases in China instead of the United States. And so, you know, that's kind of why the U.S. wants you to buy American goods so that you help out the local economies. Okay? Uh, it helps. Well, the British, in order to fight this, decided to sell everything extremely under cost, even taking large losses to make it so that it was not a financially viable way to for the U.S. to develop their industries. Well, anyway, I'm going to keep on moving, but I hope you understand what a tariff is and the importance of the Bank of the U.S. You don't want to be on the barter system. I don't want to have to carry around like half of a chicken or, half of a duck because I bought something and it only cost half of it. So this leads us to yet the end of another day. I hope everyone's having a great day. Thank you so much for all your hard work, and I'll see you in class soon. Until then, this is Cristobal de la Mediame, and I will see you on the other side. Or next time we have class. I guess I'll see you on the other side. Well, never mind. I don't even want to start this conversation.